I couldn't believe my fortune as I finally stepped onto the renowned mountain crest path. The idea of trekking through untamed wilderness and witnessing the grandeur of nature up close had always called to me. With my pack strapped tightly to my back and a surge of excitement coursing through me, I set off on what I hoped would be the adventure of a lifetime. The first few days felt like a dream. The sun beamed down from above, warming the rugged landscape. The scenery was nothing short of spectacular. Towering peaks, dense green woods, and pristine, mirror-like lakes. I basked in the serenity, savoring each step along the twisting trail. But, as is often true of nature, the weather's temperament changed abruptly. By the fourth day, a mass of threatening gray clouds rolled in, blotting out the once clear sky. A sharp, cold wind pierced through my clothing, sending involuntary shivers down my spine. The air felt heavy and still, as though bracing for something ominous. Consulting my map, I realized there were still several miles to cover before reaching the next campsite. Gritting my teeth, I adjusted my pack and pressed onward, determined to find shelter before the brewing storm reached its peak. Time crawled by as the weather worsened, becoming more menacing with each passing moment. The wind roared through the tall trees, bending them precariously. Fat, icy raindrops began to pour down, creating a chaotic symphony as they struck the leaves and my rain gear. What had been a well-defined trail quickly turned into a swampy mess, with each step becoming a laborious challenge. My boots sank deeply into the mud, making progress grueling and slow. As daylight faded, a sense of urgency gripped me. I needed to find a safe spot before the forest was completely consumed by night. Just when I felt my resolve wavering, I spotted an old cabin tucked between the trees. Its windows were broken, and the wood looked warped and faded with time. Though the structure appeared long abandoned, it offered the promise of shelter from the punishing storm. Fueled by hope, I stumbled to the cabin and pushed open the creaky door. The inside was frozen in time, cloaked in dust and decay. The air carried the faint scent of rot, and the beam from my flashlight cast unsettling shadows on the worn furniture. It was evident no one had been there for decades. As I cautiously moved further in, my heart skipped when I noticed a handwritten note on a grimy table. The writing, faint and hard to read, spoke of a terrible curse tied to the cabin. The note warned of a malevolent spirit said to haunt the forest, preying on those who sought refuge here. A chill crept up my spine, and goosebumps spread across my skin. Was this an attempt to scare off intruders? A prank? Or was there some truth to the tale? Peering through the broken window into the darkness beyond, I strained to see anything unusual but found only shadows. Then, a piercing, bone-chilling scream ripped through the air. The sound was so horrifying that I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. The noise echoed in the cabin, seeming to vibrate through the very walls. Terror gripped me as I realized the storm may have awakened something unnatural. Clutching my hiking poles, I mustered every ounce of courage and bolted from the cabin. The wind lashed at my face, and the rain blurred my vision as I tore through the dense woods. The cries of the creature, whatever it was, pursued me relentlessly. Branches snagged at my clothes, and my legs burned with exertion as I pushed forward. At last, a faint light appeared in the distance, the campsite I had been struggling to reach. Drawing on every remaining bit of strength, I sprinted toward the glow. Finally, I broke into the clearing, drenched, gasping for breath, and utterly exhausted. The other hikers, alarmed by my state, quickly gathered around. Their concerned faces brought a sense of relief I hadn't felt in hours. They shared their tents and supplies, offering warmth and companionship as the storm continued to rage outside. For several days, the rain and wind kept us grounded. But during that time, I found solace in the camaraderie of the group. When the weather finally cleared, We resumed our journey along the mountain crest path, each of us more aware of nature's merciless power. Looking back, the experience changed me. It served as a reminder of the awe-inspiring beauty of the wilderness, tempered by its dangers. To those who venture onto these trails, I offer this warning: respect the path, for within its splendor lies the possibility of unimaginable challenges that will test your courage and resilience. Nature had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could escape and connect with the untamed beauty of the outdoors. When the chance came to spend a day hiking through Michigan's lush woodlands, I couldn't say no. I had no idea that this journey would turn into a nightmare, a close encounter with the creature of local legend. The morning began with skies as clear as glass and a breeze so soft it whispered through the branches. I arrived early at the trailhead, brimming with excitement. It was supposed to be a solo hike to clear my mind, with plans to meet friends at the end for a small celebration. The trail twisted through thick forest, the ground littered with a patchwork of colorful leaves. The air was rich with the scent of pine, and birds sang harmoniously as I ventured deeper. As the miles passed, the trees became denser, their towering forms blotting out the sunlight. Shadows danced eerily along the ground, casting an almost surreal ambience. Despite the beauty around me, an unshakable unease began to settle in. It was as though the forest itself whispered warnings only my subconscious could hear. Pushing aside my growing nervousness, I pressed on. The woods seemed darker now, more oppressive. The once lively sounds faded into an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or the faint rustle of unseen movement. Each sound made my heart jump. Soon, a strange smell wafted through the air, sharp and distinct. A mix of damp fur, rotting foliage, and an almost metallic tang. My pulse quickened. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but an inexplicable curiosity drove me forward. A sudden noise, branches cracking, froze me in place. Slowly, I scanned my surroundings, my eyes darting between the dense trees. And then I saw it. Standing in a beam of sunlight was a creature I couldn't have imagined, even in my darkest dreams. It towered on two legs, its body covered in filthy, matted fur. It looked like a terrifying fusion of human and wolf, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow. Those eyes locked onto mine, radiating an unnatural malice that chilled me to my core. Its snout curled back, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth in a snarl that seemed almost like a sinister grin. I was frozen in place, trapped in a macabre standoff with this monstrosity. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I knew it would be pointless. Its predatory gaze made it clear that I was its target. Without warning, the beast lunged at me, claws extended, its guttural roar shattering the silence of the forest. Instinct took over, and I barely dodged the first attack, stumbling backward as it swiped at me again. I scrambled, adrenaline fueling my every move, but the creature was relentless. The chase was a nightmare. I tore through underbrush and leapt over fallen logs, my breath ragged and chest burning. The beast followed, its heavy steps crashing through the forest, always just behind me. Panic clawed at my mind as I realized I was hopelessly lost, my chances of escape dwindling by the second. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me, I spotted an old, crumbling cabin half hidden in the trees. It was my only hope. Fueled by desperation, I sprinted for it, throwing myself inside and slamming the rickety door shut behind me. The rotting wood groaned under the force, barely holding together. I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding as I listened for the creature. The silence was deafening. Minutes stretched into hours, each second feeling like an eternity. The musty air inside the cabin was suffocating, thick with the smell of decay and my own fear. But the beast didn't come. As night fell, the forest outside grew eerily quiet. The moon's pale light seeped through the cabin's cracked windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. Exhaustion finally overtook me, and I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by nightmares of glowing yellow eyes and gnashing teeth. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the cabin's walls. Cautiously, I opened the door and stepped outside, every nerve on edge. The forest was still, as if the horrors of the previous day had been nothing more than a terrible dream. Stumbling back onto the trail, I made my way to safety. My body was battered, my spirit shaken, but I was alive. As I returned to the world of people and noise, the weight of my experience sank in. The creature was no myth. It was real. The encounter left an indelible mark on me, a constant reminder of the terror that can lurk in the heart of the woods. Back when I was in high school, I joined the cross-country team and occasionally participated in soccer to keep fit. To stay in shape, I often ventured onto a 10-mile hiking trail winding through the Erie Hills outside the quiet little town where I lived. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other. The trail wasn't completely deserted, but it carried an unsettling atmosphere, especially in certain sections buried deep in the woods. There, the path turned treacherous, muddy and uneven, with twisted tree roots snaking across the ground like hidden traps. I loved the challenge, as it forced me to focus on every step and forget everything else for a while. For nearly 4 years, the trail became my go-to escape, a reliable and safe haven. That is, until one day when things took a terrifying turn. Just like many times before, I parked my car on a gravel road that branched off the main highway. The spot was unassuming, a forgotten corner that blended into the landscape. Before starting my hike, I took a few minutes to relax, smoking a cigarette while curating a playlist on my phone. Once my earphones were in and a mint refreshed my breath, I set off on the trail. Oddly enough, I can't remember encountering anyone else that day. It was early afternoon, not the busiest time, but still, I usually saw the occasional jogger or dog walker. I'd only walked a few minutes along the gravel path when the terrain shifted into its wild, untamed state. That's when an unfamiliar tension settled over me, like a heavy fog wrapping around my chest. I pressed on, determined to shake off the unease, but as I reached the midpoint of the trail, its most secluded stretch, the feeling grew stronger. My legs slowed to a cautious walk as the steep incline demanded more careful footing. I pulled out my earphones, craving the natural sounds of the forest, only to realize there were none. The woods had fallen into an unnatural silence, the kind that prickles the back of your neck. The absence of birdsong or rustling leaves amplified the creeping dread coiling in my stomach. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. After all, there were occasional sightings of wildlife in the area, like foxes or raccoons, though larger predators like cougars were rare. But this fear was something different, something that bypassed logic entirely. Then came the moment that would haunt me forever. A brief, fragmented memory, more like a broken scene from a dream, played out in my mind. My attention was drawn to a shadowy figure among the trees. It wasn't an animal, and it certainly wasn't an illusion. It was a man. He was standing completely still, partially obscured by the dense foliage. The sight of him triggered a deep, instinctive response. I quickly turned my gaze away, pretending not to notice. It was as though some primal part of me knew to avoid acknowledging his presence. Yet, even without looking, I could feel his eyes on me. He wasn't following me, at least not yet. He was just standing there, off to the right, at about a 2 o'clock angle, silent and unyielding. I kept walking, trying to appear calm, but every step felt heavier as the tension mounted. When I rounded a bend in the trail, putting some distance between us, my body erupted into action. Panic surged through me like wildfire, and I broke into an all-out sprint. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but fear drove me faster than I'd ever run before. Though I couldn't hear footsteps behind me, it felt like someone, or something, was right there, just out of reach. The sensation was overwhelming, as if a predator was inches from its prey. I didn't stop running until the woods gave way to the clearing where I'd parked my car. When I finally reached the vehicle, I collapsed against the door, gasping for breath. My hands were trembling so much it took several attempts to get the keys into the lock. I scanned the edge of the forest, expecting to see the man emerge from the shadows. But no one came. The woods were still and lifeless, as if the encounter had never happened. I sat in my car for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. Was it real? Had someone been watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike? Or was my imagination playing tricks on me after years of following the same routine? To this day, I can't explain what happened. I eventually moved away from that town, but the memory of that afternoon refuses to fade. It's changed the way I view those once familiar trails, casting a dark shadow over what used to be my sanctuary. I often wonder if anyone else who hikes that trail has felt the same unsettling presence. But I've never asked. I don't want people to think I've lost my mind. Frank Zeller was widely recognized for his achievements in running and mountain climbing, including winning races on all 7 continents. He had visited 140 countries and scaled more than 190 peaks. Frank relocated from Los Angeles to Carson City in 1985 and chose to stay because of his love for the nearby mountains. He stood 6 feet tall, weighed 155 pounds, and had silver hair and green eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was reportedly dressed in a bright orange shirt and beige hiking shorts. On a Saturday, Frank embarked on a day hike along an off-trail path but failed to return as expected. His absence was reported the following Sunday. Known for his fearless approach to climbing, Frank had scaled peaks around the globe, often taking on highly technical routes and serving as a leader for his climbing companions. He was a prominent figure in both competitive running and mountaineering communities. Frank's passing has sparked an outpouring of tributes from those who admired his accomplishments. He set numerous records in his age category, including winning his division in all 6 Abbott World Marathon majors and completing marathons across every continent, even Antarctica. Among the famous mountains he summited were Denali, Kilimanjaro, and Mount Elbrus. Frank's personal website chronicled his adventures, showcasing his achievements through photographs and detailed lists of countries he had explored. He was described as a passionate and goal-driven individual who approached challenges with unyielding determination. The circumstances of Frank Zeller's ascent of Mount Grace and the events leading to his final moments are still under investigation by park officials. More information may come to light as the inquiry continues. However, this incident serves as a somber reminder of nature's unpredictability and the fragility of life. My heartfelt condolences go out to Frank's family and loved ones. If anyone has a case they'd like to see featured on this program, please don't hesitate to share it in the comments below. One late evening, a friend and I decided to head out and smoke a joint. This was back before it was legal in Washington, so we had to be discreet about it. We went to the backyard and sat down. We hadn't even started yet when, out of nowhere, the gate leading to the alley swung open. What we saw was some kind of small creature. It reminded me of a mix between Dobby from Harry Potter and Gollum from The Lord of the Rings, but somehow it looked more realistic, if that makes sense. It was covered with a cloak or some kind of fabric, though I couldn't tell for sure. The moment I caught sight of it, the creature moved fast, almost too fast to seem natural, retreating back into the alley. It silently shut the gate behind it. The whole thing happened so quickly, but it left us frozen in place. Even though it wasn't the longest encounter, it's proof that even in a city, there's more out there than meets the eye. The next strange encounter happened years later when I was hiking deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. I had gone on a nature walk to relax, and back then weed was completely illegal in Pennsylvania. To enjoy it in peace, you had to trek at least 10 miles into the wilderness. I had just lit up a joint and was enjoying the sounds of nature when I heard something moving behind me. When I turned around, I saw what looked like a massive figure, easily 12 to 15 feet tall, darting from one tree to another. For a second, I froze, my heart pounding. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I tried to shake it off and turned back toward the creek, I heard the sound again. It was a strange, high-pitched whooping or whistling noise. I spun around and this time saw the creature more clearly. It was tall and thin, practically gliding or bouncing between trees. The thing's movements were unnaturally fluid, and it was making that eerie sound the entire time. I've seen pictures of supposed Sasquatches before, and they vary. Some are bulky and muscular, others more lean. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't like Slender Man, exactly, but it had this eerie, puppet-like appearance. Its dark clothing or covering made it look almost wavy, like it wasn't entirely solid. I can't even properly describe how unsettling it was, but I didn't stick around to find out more. I bolted out of those woods as quickly as I could. To this day, I've never encountered anything remotely similar. If you ever find yourself hiking in the remote forests of Pennsylvania, keep your eyes open. There's something strange lurking out there. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. 15 feet tall? That has to be an exaggeration. But in the moment, I swear, it felt like this thing was towering over me. When I was a kid, maybe around 9 years old, I believe I saw my first ghost. We were hiking deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains on a camping trip. I was uneasy about staying overnight near the summit of a mountain, but my mom reassured me. Animals wouldn't dare mess with your dad, she joked, holding my hand firmly. I trusted her, though I couldn't shake the nervous feeling. We trekked along the trail until my dad decided it was time to set up camp. We found a clearing as the sun started to dip below the horizon. I noticed my mom looked uneasy. Her face was pale and she gripped my hand tighter. "Ben, could we camp somewhere else?" she asked my dad, still holding my small hand. She didn't like the strange feeling the woods gave off, and honestly, I felt it too. Dad shook his head. "It's getting late, Lily. I'm not wandering around in the dark for a better spot." I remember asking if we could just go back home. The clearing felt unsettling, but we stayed, made some hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, and then crawled into the big tent my dad had brought. Dad fell asleep right away, but my mom and I stayed awake for a while. "Sammy, are you still awake?" she whispered. "Yeah, Mom. I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're safe inside the tent." Eventually, I dozed off. When I woke up early in the morning, the first light of dawn was filtering through the trees. I crawled out of the tent and saw my mom sitting cross-legged on the ground, her eyes closed in meditation. She always started her mornings like that, often with a mug of herbal tea in hand. I tapped her shoulder. "Can we go for a walk?" She opened her eyes and smiled. "Sure, but not too far. Your dad would worry if we wandered off." We wandered near the campsite, staying within sight of the tent. Then my mom suddenly froze mid-step. I followed her gaze and saw it too. A faint, misty figure of a man leaning against a tall maple tree about 20 feet away. It wasn't clear, just a gray, ghostly form. He didn't seem scary though, more like he was sad and calm. He lifted his head slightly, as if noticing us. I rubbed my eyes, and just like that, he vanished. My mom looked at me, her expression quiet but understanding. I knew then that she had seen him too. There was no fear in her eyes, only a sense of acknowledgement. After that moment, I've never encountered another ghost in my life, but I'll never forget that serene, solemn figure in the woods. Four years ago, I was a sophomore in high school. At the time, I didn't have my driver's license yet. That was around the period I began experimenting with certain substances. One of my neighborhood friends, let's call him Eric, knew about a creek roughly a mile and a half from my house, which seemed like an ideal spot to hang out and smoke. However, getting there involved a bit of a trek. The area was known for having some old, scattered structures deep in the woods, about a dozen small concrete shacks, rusty barrel fire pits, and even a platform built into the trees. Nobody really knew their purpose, but they were clustered together within a small radius. This was about a quarter mile into the woods, about half a mile from the nearest road. We'd been to the spot plenty of times during the day, usually with more friends. Since we lived in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood, it didn't strike us as particularly risky. Besides, we'd never seen anyone else out there. It had become a popular hangout for kids our age. Most of us figured it was just a long-abandoned homeless campsite, though some wild rumors floated around about the place. There were the usual spooky stories teenagers like to tell. Murderers with hooks for hands, hidden cannibals, or some other sinister presence lurking there. Just typical campfire tales. One of the shacks was about 7 feet long, 7 feet wide, and 5 feet tall, with the floor dug lower inside, making the roof feel higher. When we first stumbled across it a couple of years earlier, we found some makeshift weapons, empty food cans, and other trash. But since then, nothing unusual had shown up. Just beer cans, cigarette butts, and old roaches left by other kids. The inside was covered in graffiti, mostly done with markers, and reeked of urine. None of us liked going in there. Nearby, about 50 feet away, there was a platform built into a tree. It had a crude ladder made of branches leading up to it. The platform, roughly 5 by 5 feet, was perched 20 feet off the ground. The wood was rotting and unstable, so climbing up wasn't easy. Anyway, back to the story. One October evening, Eric and I decided to head out there. It was around 6 p.m., and we wanted to get to the spot before it got completely dark. We had other places closer to my house, but nothing quite compared to the eerie excitement of that shack. We made our way through some backyards, crossed a field, and then entered the tree line. A line of stones in the creek let us cross without getting wet. By the time we reached the area, the sun had almost completely set, and only faint light filtered through the trees. This was the first time either of us had been there at night. The last stretch of the trail was a steep, uphill climb. We could barely make out the shack through the dimness. Something about the atmosphere put us both on edge. We whispered to each other, trying not to make any noise. Neither of us felt like going too close to the shack, so we decided to stay about 50 feet away, near the edge of the bluff we just climbed. While I was shifting around to find better footing, my foot caught on something. It was a fishing line, strung about a foot off the ground and tied to a tree. As I tripped, the line yanked an old metal bucket into some scrap metal planted nearby, creating a loud clatter. Almost immediately, we heard movement. Someone was climbing down from the tree platform about 20 feet away. They dropped to the ground, landing in the leaves below. Panicked, we bolted. We scrambled down the bluff, sliding on our backsides and crashing into trees along the way. The sound of scurrying and heavy breathing followed us. At the bottom, we sprinted through the creek. I slipped on the loose rocks, landing hard in the freezing water before scrambling up and running again. Seconds later, we heard splashes behind us. By the time we cleared the tree line, we were in an open field, about a quarter-mile across. We ran as fast as we could, gasping for breath. Whoever was behind us was catching up. We could hear their heavy footsteps and labored breathing growing louder. Desperate, we sprinted through someone's backyard, setting off their dogs, and finally reached the street. A car screeched to a stop as we stumbled out into the road. We froze, trying to catch our breath. When we turned around, we saw a figure standing just outside the glow of a house's floodlights. They stood there for a moment before turning and retreating back into the woods. Shaking, we apologized to the driver, tossed the weed we were carrying, and called my sister to come pick us up. We told her what had happened and begged her not to tell my parents. Neither of us ever went back to that creek again. This happened during the summer of 2003 in a small town near Massachusetts, where I was living at the time. For context, I'm a woman, and I was 22 years old, just about to begin my final year at a college in Massachusetts. That summer, I decided to stay close to campus and take a few extra courses to make my senior year easier. I rented a cozy apartment with a couple of friends, and we absolutely loved the place. Our town was peaceful and mostly filled with other college students. I especially enjoyed living so close to the coast during the summer. My schedule was relatively light. I was balancing part-time work and school, so I had plenty of time to enjoy my independence. I've always been passionate about fitness, and one of my favorite activities that summer was rollerblading on the local walking trails while listening to music on my headphones. Nearly every day, I drive to the trail, park at a small lot near the entrance, and skate the 1-mile stretch until it reached another park. At that second park, I'd usually take a short break, drink some water, and then skate back to the original park where my car was parked. It was about a 2-mile round trip, and I loved doing it every day until something unsettling happened. One morning in July, I overslept and was running behind on my usual routine. As I got ready, I realized I couldn't find my headphones anywhere. They weren't on the table where I usually left them. After searching for a while, I gave up and decided to go without them. When I got to the trail, I put on my skates and started down the path. It was a warm, sunny morning, and everything seemed normal, at least at first. About halfway down the trail, an inexplicable sense of unease washed over me. My stomach tightened, goosebumps covered my skin despite the heat, and a strong feeling of dread took over. I've always trusted my gut, and this time was no different. I kept skating but stayed hyper-aware of my surroundings. That's when I noticed him, a man standing just off the path ahead of me. At first, I couldn't figure out what he was doing. Then I realized he was stepping backward, trying to blend into the trees as if to hide. Even from a distance, I could see his face. He was staring at me, his expression cold and predatory. He wore a dark hoodie, jeans, and heavy work boots, clothing completely unsuitable for the weather or exercise. I had to make a decision. Should I turn around and skate back, risking losing my momentum? Or should I keep going and hope he wouldn't jump out at me? I felt a wave of anger. I faced threatening situations before, and I was tired of feeling powerless. My hands clenched into fists, and I decided to confront the situation head-on. As I approached, I locked eyes with him, silently memorizing every detail. His beard, dark eyes, the plain baseball cap he wore, and his overall demeanor. My glare was defiant, silently warning him not to try anything. We stared at each other for a tense few seconds before he broke eye contact and looked away. I didn't slow down. Instead, I skated past him as fast as I could, heading straight to the second park. When I reached the end of the trail, I got off the path, unstrapped my skates, and walked along the nearby road to get back to my car. It was a long and nerve-wracking walk, but I eventually made it. Once inside my car, I locked the doors and drove home. I thought the ordeal was over, but later that evening, when I returned to my apartment after work, I saw my upstairs neighbor pacing in the parking lot, talking on his phone. He looked distressed. As I approached, he ended his call and told me his girlfriend had been attacked earlier that day while walking on the same trail. She'd been injured and was recovering in the hospital. My heart sank. I asked if the attack happened on the trail, and when he confirmed, I told him about my encounter with the man that morning. He immediately asked me to describe the man to the police. Thanks to the details I had memorized, I was able to give a clear description of him. Though I checked the news for months afterward, I never found out if he was caught. My neighbor's girlfriend recovered, but she moved away shortly after the incident. I couldn't shake the guilt, wondering if I had narrowly avoided what happened to her. The strangest part? The next day, I found my headphones sitting exactly where I had looked before leaving. I know they weren't there earlier, and to this day, I can't explain why they disappeared that morning. Perhaps it was fate or something else protecting me.